Welcome to the Manage to Win podcast. We have a great show today with Dan Tocchini. Have you ever considered how every leader is criminally minded? Hey, I hadn't thought about that. As a matter of fact, I don't think that's me. I don't think that's you. So who is this? We need to learn more. You need to hear from Dan. He's got over 20,000 hours training, mentoring, leading workshops, coaching leaders. He's been doing this for 40, 50 years. The guy is a master. I actually connected with him about 15 years ago. We worked on a leader separately, but at the same time. And unfortunately, the leader did not listen to either of us. And we had similar conclusions. But that's the way it goes. So now you get to listen to Dan and actually think about, hey, this guy's got some cool stuff. I need to act on this. Let's dive in. Dan, welcome to the show. Now, the audience doesn't know it, but I remember you from years ago when we met, when you were involved in a situation where I was there. We're not going to talk about that. But I was really struck as I looked at, oh, what do I want to talk about Dan or talk with about Dan? And I saw this statement where you said, we are all criminally minded. And I thought, oh, that's a good place to start. We got to dive into that. I mean, when we're talking leadership,
Oh yeah,
where do you want to go with that one?
Well, it's more of a confession, and then I've discovered it about. First, I knew it about myself, and I discovered it about others. Um, but I usually say, we're all criminals. Just some of us are more arrestable than others. And what I mean by it is, and I think everybody listening knows what kind of criminal, how criminal they are, when they are criminal. Criminal meaning you treat somebody the way you wouldn't want to be treated. You violate your promise and find a way to make yourself right about it. There's a number of different ways to do it. I'm actually in the process of outlining a book called The Truth About Lies.
Yeah.
In fact, the byline is, "Will crucify your mind." Um, and I've been working on it for a little bit, but I do a lot of work with leadership teams, and I found that, well, for instance, I've done a lot of work with kids coming out of prison. I developed curriculum many years ago. I've worked with Homeboy Industries. I worked with Defy Ventures. I worked with the Cornerstone Project, which are all working with kids and men and coming out of prison. And I studied a lot of, my background is in human performance. And there were a couple of psychologists who were working with kids, working with prisoners, working with the criminal minded, which they basically, after doing some reading their research, they produced precedented results. But the first 10 years of their work, they got basically conned by a group of criminals they were working with in prison. And when they realized they got conned, they realized that the typical psychological approach, the typical Freudian approach to recovery didn't work. Basically, they were being conned. And rather than get disappointed about it, they looked at it as very powerful research. And what they came to, and what I've found to be true in the work that I do, both with the out and out criminals and just us normal, unarrestable criminals, is that when somebody's perpetrating, they're externalizing. They're actually blaming the circumstances or history, something outside of them, for what they're doing, even though they know what they're doing is not working, it's violating their principles, it's hurting other people. They'll blame it, and you'll see it in most extreme cases. If you listen to anybody interview somebody who's just been busted, they're going to blame, like criminals blame the perp blames the victim for why. Well, if he didn't leave his door open, I wouldn't have robbed him. That kind of thing, as if the circumstance was why he did it. So
yeah.
I've learned to listen to that first in myself, because I've learned that if you can't manage yourself, you can't lead well. You can lead, but not well. And if I want to lead well, which means sustainable, ongoing, life-giving, transformational type of leadership, I've got to constantly be aware of my own shadow and all the things I go through, and the impact I have on others. If I'm really clear about that and I stay clear about that, then I can lead others in a way that produces unprecedented results. To me, that's the game. It's an inner game. Leadership is inner game of getting a hold of that criminal voice that
It's
wants to blame, shame, or take credit for everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really deep thing. And by the way, I did cell ministry many decades ago at San Quentin for a year. And so it was very eye-opening. And but it was, the vast majority of them didn't do it, or they were very good at their own story and seemed to believe it themselves, as
Oh,
you
oh yeah,
say.
you have to believe it. Dostoevsky talks about in his book, The Brothers Karamazov, he talks about keep an eye on your own. Zosima says to, I think it was Alyosha says, keep an eye on your own lie. Watch it every day, every minute if possible, because basically that's where things start to go off, and we lie to ourselves very quickly, very easily, for numerous reasons. And if we're aware of it, it's not it transforms from an enemy into an ally because it alerts me to aspects of my own way of my own being with people that I'm unaware of or tend to be unaware of. Like we automatic, our heart pumps, we breathe, our eyes focus, all without thinking about it. Well, and we have to lie to ourselves, by the way. I mean, we're doing it neurologically. You and I are taking in 3-4 million bits of information every minute. We're only processing anywhere from 60, maybe to 120 or 130 kilobytes of that information every minute. So we have to delete, distort, and generalize. Our brain does it naturally to create a model of the world and then live by it. It's pretty remarkable how well it does it, but don't kid yourself. There's a whole lot in there that's not true, right? And really a lot of life is about are you willing to pull your head out of the sand and really connect with what's in front of you? Because if you want to get to where you want to go and where you want to go, you actually have to get clear about where you are. So when you plot the path, it's got some power, right?
So Dan, this is really a problem because we've only got like 45 minutes or an hour, and you're bringing up days of content. So
Yeah.
I, one of the things I've learned is that the greatest salesperson to sell me on something is me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And when you bring that up, and for decades, I mean, I'm sure it's still true in my life in certain areas, but for decades, I had one or more major lies that I was telling myself, and I was sincerely convinced it was true,
Oh,
but it
believe
was
me,
it was not.
I was convinced. I've been clean now 40 years, but I was a cocaine addict coming out of college. I played football. And that's where I got hooked up. We were doing it in the huddle, and pretty soon I'm doing it in the classroom, and then I'm leaving school and doing it every day, and then I'm dealing it. And I was convinced I could never drop that stuff. I lied to myself for years until the price got so clear. And many people will pay this price, but the idea of losing my wife and my 1-year-old boy, who's now 42 or soon to be 42, was sobering. And it was the price that got me to sober up and faced what was not true about what I was telling myself. But I think that goes all the way down to a bad operation. When you have an operation that I'm working with a client right now, he's losing a couple million a year, been losing it for 4 years, and wants to defend what he's been doing. He's got a whole series of conversations, and God bless him, he's a good man. In my interruptions, it hasn't been comfortable, but his willingness to say, I'll consider that. And then as he considers it, he told me the other day, whole new worlds are opening up around him and nothing's changed. Those worlds have been there. And now he's starting to see new resource, right? For a while, you get on yourself and make some moral judgment of yourself, might feel shame. But if you can just suspend that shame, you'll actually see new possibility because you have resource you never had before, stuff
Yeah.
that's real that you can act on. So
It's really interesting if you go back to the piece that you said from the book, where focusing on your lie every day or whatever that
every
comment
minute,
was, every
yeah, Father
minute.
Zosima and the brothers Karamazov. Yeah.
Very interesting. Talk about that I don't know whether in your own life or maybe some of your clients, but there's kind of, first of all, being aware that we can be lying to ourselves. And then the next stage, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, is, then being aware of, okay, well, what's one of these big lies, these
Yeah,
big fat lies that's really hurting me the most that I need to stand up to?
yeah. I was talking to my partner the other day, and we were talking about just things we struggle through when we're working with clients together. And I told him, I said, I realized that my complaining is a setup for a back door. And he goes, right on, I was going to give you that feedback. That when I hear you start to complain, I know you're bailing out. You're going to now use whatever you're complaining about to not actually take the risk you need to take to get it to turn out.
But
And I
can
thought,
you give us an example on that?
there's this guy we're working with. He's really tough to work with. He just thinks he knows everything, and he's not very curious. And anytime, and he knows, it's the guy I told you he's losing $2 million a year. And God bless him, he's come a long way. But every time we get into a new shift, we'll make a change because he's given us permission to do certain things in the business, and we'll make a change because we work on the ground with our clients. We don't just consult. We put one or two or three principles on the ground, and we scope it, the key issues, and then we work with the team to strategize and deliver, right? So we get to work, and the team's all in, but this guy has a habit of micromanaging, so he'll start to come in and put his hands in. And I'll start to complain, like, I'm done. That's it. In the beginning, I said, I don't know if we should take this client. I don't care how much he wants to pay. And then I'm like, we see, I told you this guy, and that's my way out. That's my way to say, I'm washing my hands of this.
Yeah.
You guys took this account, you deal with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was starting to see that from my journaling. So I was confessing it to my partner. He goes, I was going to tell you that. And
Yeah.
it seemed like when you start complaining, that's almost like your back door, you're out. And I noticed not only myself, that's a criminal strategy. I've seen it with other criminals, and it's like, right on. So, it just helps the relationship with my partners. They see it. It's a lie. Keep an eye on it. It usually means I feel frustrated and at my wits' end, and I probably need to listen more and find some resourceful questions to help understand what's wanted and needed, rather than because what's the conversation behind it. I shouldn't have to deal with this. This shouldn't be an issue. This guy should. I discovered all this in the last couple of days on this one issue. This guy's old enough. He should know better. Why am I having to babysit him?
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard this from a lot of leaders. Well, it's like, no, that means I'm frustrated. I see more possibility I'm getting at. What else, what questions, what new stand can I take? Who else can I include? What's wanted and needed to move this ball? Rather than how do I get out of here?
Yeah, interesting. And one of the other things that you have written down in some of the notes to consider is that leadership is a sacred experience.
Yeah,
And so it sounds like leadership is a sacred journey, more than experience versus a destination, right? And
yeah.
so I have that as one piece of the question,
I
but another
love that.
piece
I
I have
love
for
that.
you,
Sacred
yeah,
journey. Yeah, that's good.
sacred
That's good.
journey. It just came to me now. So I don't think I can take credit for it. I think maybe that was a gift. But the other thing I'd like you to talk about that, and I don't know whether we want to segue or not into, a lot of things I see with behaviors and habits come from wounds. And we got a lot of wounded people out there. I mean, everybody virtually, but some of them are criminally where they're really violating, others are not. But I wonder whether you want to go from the sacred journey of leadership to how much of these issues have a spiritual component, and
Well,
whether it helps to be aware of that when you're working with these leaders, even if you can't directly address it.
I think they all do. When you say spiritual, it translates to relational, right? Because you can't see the spirit. The spirit is a relationship between God and us and God, us and each other, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say that it's all anchored that way. I call it sacred because a profound sense of responsibility, purpose, and connection to something greater than myself, other people, the people we're serving, the customer, the client, whatever, the
Yeah.
people I'm, leading, etc. And it's sacred because it involves my influence of others. Am I aware of, the impact I'm having on others and in their lives in meaningful ways? Am I, because we're shaping experiences together,
Yeah.
and it involves their personal growth and their futures. It's a stewardship that for me I experience as sacred because it impacts everybody in their life and in my life. And there's a certain weight to it. There's a beautiful potential in it. So in my job as a leader is not only to accomplish and to gain, to actualize my own potential, but to support others in doing that. And so that makes it sacred. It's a service to others, which, at its core, serving others is the art and science of leadership. And if you're not serving others, you're serving yourself, and you're not really leading anybody. You're using people for yourself. It's an alignment with a purpose, that concerns, that brings people together. When you have a team, there's a purpose, it brings people together. So am I going to honor that mission and vision? And am I going to find ways to align and transcend the things that want to disintermediate or disrupt the relationships that need to be aligned in order to have it turn out? Am I willing to risk that way? It's a form of transformation. Something old becomes something new, something that's never been, that unprecedented comes into existence if we're really, having it happen. It's an authentic connection, if you will, because it's deeply relational. If you can't relate well to your team, you're going to have pretty surfacey results. You might have a good top line, but your bottom line is going to suffer, if you will.
Yeah. And what was the term you said? Did you say there's a beautiful potential or beautiful purpose? Or what was the?
Yeah, beautiful. That's exactly what I don't know what I said, but that's what I meant.
Yeah, it
Beautiful.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to describe it.
And
And
and you're going to
yeah,
leave a legacy too, man. I mean, the other part of makes it sacred is you're leaving something for other people. Like I'm 70 years old, I'm in my 70th year. And I realize I'm leaving something behind to the people I work with, to my children, my wife, my family, my grandkids. And so if I'm going to take time away, I want to make sure I leave something of value and that's lasting, that people learn from their suffering. That makes wisdom. And they've got some foresight because of that. And
yeah,
because of that, there's a moral and ethical compass involved as well. All of that makes it a very sacred process. And part of what makes it sacred is I think Jung hit it on the head. You really got to come to terms with your shadow, the things that are in you that, to your point, the wounding, which is basically the biological need to protect yourself. Mammal. So mammals are, what makes them so powerful is that if they get themselves into a position where they're hurt, they won't ever put themselves in that position again. But we're a special kind of mammal. We can override that experience and evaluate the next situation that looks like that is potentially as powerful as that betrayal, and still navigate it. And that's the conscientious, self-disciplined aspect of freedom. And I can be free from my need from survival having to run me. I can transcend survival and start to thrive because I recognize the possibility and I've learned from past experiences, so I can engage in ways that I up until that point never have. And that's a transformation, right? And so, you got to be conscious to do this. A lot of people want to have a business, but they don't want to get conscious. That's a problem because nowhere else have I experienced the importance of consciousness, awareness, the willingness to take responsibility to be as important as it is in business, because it not just doesn't just concern me, it concerns everybody I'm working with and everybody I'm serving, everybody, my clients and customers as well.
so what do you mean by being conscious?
Aware of who I am, what I'm up to, and the impact I'm having, the resources available, the vision I'm serving, the current reality I'm there to navigate and connect with. It's like there's just a lot there, right? I don't think people really stop and think much about. I know I didn't for many years. I'm just an unconscious competent floundering around and getting lucky every once in a while. Well, I noticed that those who are consistently successful tend to be much more conscious about every move they're making before they make it. And then they give themselves completely to it, and then they deal with what comes up. And sometimes they miss, and sometimes they hit. They often miss more than they hit, but the misses provide the kind of feedback and information that strengthens their next move. And that really takes a certain fortitude, and I call faith. Like you're not, I don't depend on myself. I really believe that God's going to meet me if I'm authentically true. I'm standing. I'm
And
going to be met. I'm
and
met
doesn't it
well.
require a certain amount of humility? I remember Jim Collins, Good to Great, those
Oh yeah,
11 or 14, the one trait they had in common was
humility.
humility.
Yeah, the willingness. Learning introduces us to humility. So if you're going to
Yeah.
learn, you got to be humble, because whatever you thought you know is either going to be destroyed or added to in some way. So if you're going to go learn, you're going to be humbled, because you're going to find out what you know is incomplete or inadequate or insufficient, like that.
And is it possible that when it comes to learning, that we can learn more or more in depth, more comprehensively if we build up an inner awareness or strength of gratitude?
Right on.
Because gratitude would then open us up more, because that would probably tie with humility, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking about, I think that has a lot to do with being fascinated. I really believe that fascination is the true and proper mother to all discipline, right? Like when we get fascinated, we get disciplined because we want to understand who we're with, what we're about, what's going on. I really got this from my wife. She had a daycare, and I thought she was doing a daycare. It was a good gesture because she was adding to the household income. And when I started watching her, I saw how fascinated she was with each child, including ours. We had two children, and I couldn't tell, her attention was not distinguishable from my children to the other children, because she was so interested in them. And she's like that now as a grandmother. She's just very fascinated with children and the whole social dynamic, and I noticed that great business people are like that. They're fascinated. Like you look at Elon Musk, he's fascinated with what he does. And he's fascinated with the kinds of people that will make it successful, that will feel good about sacrificing themselves. And he has a good eye, because I've worked for him, for fascination. Like he picked Robert Mueller, I think his name is, uh, he picked him, this is the guy who invented the Saturn IX rocket. And he wasn't the best as far as grades and accomplishment in school, but he was so fascinated and so involved with what it meant to build a rocket. I worked with him for a number of years, that he selected him because of that fascination, that he would give himself so fully to the project that it was important to him. And I think that's a lot of what business is about, is understanding who has a like mind. Are you willing to be fascinated with all the facets of what it takes to bring forth whatever your vision is? Like, it's like you may not be doing everything, but you want to find the people that are going to treat it with the same kind of attention. Because if people don't have that kind of fascination, the inspiration disappears. You
It's
got to
very
court it. You got to court that, you know?
that's very interesting though. I've never heard that before. And it is very logical. It makes a lot of sense. Because if you're fascinated, first of all, you have a certain gratitude, humility, openness, But then you also, when you're fascinated, you connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you connect to it. And then that drives what I call in our three strands leadership, the heart of it is meaningful work. And that's what drives the meaningful work. It's like fascinating. Oh, what if we could do this? What if we could do
Yeah.
that?
Well, why are you doing that? That's interesting. It doesn't seem to be working like you think it should, but it might. Why are you doing that? What are you
Yeah.
seeing? What are you up to?
Yeah.
Like, tell me, and I work with a lot of engineers, and it's fun to watch them. I'll sometimes I'll just sit and watch them because if they're really working well together, they're just really there's a lot of humility about, hey, we want to get this done. What's it going to take? What did you discover? And what are you seeing? And what failed over here? And it isn't like a personal statement. When it's ugly, everybody thinks it's about them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that then it just shrinks up the innovation.
Yeah. And there's also a focus
Yeah.
because you're fascinated to get from where you are right now, point A to that point B, whatever you've defined. Wow, that's really interesting. But I want to go back a little bit because you talked about, I forget the term you used, but people being more aware of themselves. And you talked about the shadow, and
Hmm.
you talked about every minute being aware of your lie or lies. So we live in a world today that, from my experience, Dan, as we talked about, a lot of people are very wounded. One of the most common wounds is you're not good enough. And we see it all across the board, and we see it in varying degrees. So if I'm a person that's struggling consciously or subconsciously with that not good enough vibe or mantra, okay, spirit, whatever, how can I balance being aware of my lie and being aware of my shadow without beating the crap out of myself? And I just want to go crawl in a hole versus being aware of it and then flipping it
Well,
and reinforcing the positives that I've got going for
well,
myself.
there's a lie in there. The lie is you, you think you shouldn't be or aren't in not enough. You are not enough. Come to terms with that. It's all right.
Yeah.
Because if you come to terms with not being enough, nobody does it on their own. And
Yeah.
if you're okay with not being enough, then you won't be hiding that and you'll be able to take advantage of other people's eyes and their talents, and they'll want to contribute to you because you won't be competing with them to prove that you're enough. You'll be working with them to get done what matters to you, right? So I think the first step is just to be okay with not being enough. Like I played ball, I was an All-American, but I never felt like I was enough. And I was very curious about how I could get better and better and better. And I think that also alleviates the whole need for shame, which is a huge racket. I mean, certainly there's healthy shame or guilt. Like if I hurt you and I ought to feel bad because you're hurt and I wouldn't want to be hurt. That makes sense. That'll bring me to some sobriety. But I miss it. I take an arrow or I shoot it at a target and I miss. No shame. What do you think? You're going to pick up the arrow and hit the target every time? And who do you think you are? It's like, okay, now what? Right? That's where the fascination starts. Like I play golf and nobody plays golf well. So not even Tiger Woods will tell you that it's not a game you're going to master. But it's a game where you get to master yourself. You get to learn who you are, and the world disappears because you got to focus, and it's so rewarding when you break through and hit a new level and hit a great ball. Like you hit a sometimes I'll have a horrible round, but if I hit the ball really well multiple times, something it's like, okay, got it. I'll go back next week and try again, go again, or in a couple of days. Um, I see life like that. There's a great book out called Golf in the Kingdom by Michael Murphy. It's an old book. He was the founder of Esalen, and he talks about this the inner game of golf, basically, but and what it brings out. And I think life is like that. I think you ought to just come to terms with the fact that you're not going to win. You're not getting out of this alive. And what do we want to make of it while we're here? And who do we get to connect with along the way? Like that's the
Yeah.
biggest part I love about business. So we get to
Yeah.
connect.
So I love the concept of, I got to accept I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And then how do I balance that with, but here's where I am pretty good, or here's where I can contribute, or here's where I can help? How do you kind of, have you ever been where you've walked somebody through that journey where they were just really struggling because it was just this massive habit to just beat themselves up?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. I've done it myself, and I've coached hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, and it's a racket, man. That's all I can say. It's like, how do you now that how you reveal that racket? Well, first off, if I put it in some kind of framework, you got to really listen to people's complaints. Listen to my own complaint, right?
Yeah,
Anything that's a chronic complaint is the beginning of a racket, of a con, right? Of a lie, right? So
yeah,
the complaint is basically me saying, I can't get what I really want, so I'm going to settle for this. But even though I don't like this, I'm just going to settle for it. And the complaint makes me right for settling for it,
yeah, yeah,
right? And I use the complaint, like I was telling you, as a backdoor from risking again. Like my partner pointed that out. And so if I can look at one of the things I do is, what do I get from this complaint? What's the reward of this complaint?
yeah,
It gets me off the hook. I don't have to risk again. I get to look good even though I'm not doing what I promised. I mean, I can go down the line, right?
yeah, yeah,
I don't have to, I can get mad and not have to participate in things I don't like. There's a lot of immediate payoffs. And then the way I get off that is I ask myself, if I continue this, what's coming? What future's coming if I continue to settle for this lie? One of the sayings I work with in my own life and with my children, with the guys I work with, we all do this. What you don't face will eventually defeat you. So
that's
if you're not,
powerful.
and so if you're not facing something, if you're complaining about it, which means you're not facing it, then at what point and where is it going to defeat you? What price are you going to pay in the long term for your immediate relief? Right. And when people get that, because people move 7 times faster to prevent a problem than they do to have something new come about. So if you can get them to see what they're settling for and what's coming, they'll be motivated to get up and go do something, generally, or quit.
I'm wondering if somebody's struggling, that what can help them reconnect with the positive attributes that they've got. You've mentioned that you've done a lot of work with troubled youth
Mhm.
and people out of prison. I wonder, is there a connection there that if you're kind of stuck? I think I've had some people, when they're stuck, if they'll go out and serve others, try to focus on others rather than
Right
focus
on.
on
Right on.
themselves, it can be a turning point. Can that ever be a
Absolutely.
help?
Well, it gets them off themselves, right? They're
Yeah,
stuck because they want to be.
yeah.
And if you get somebody and they get out, it's really interesting. There's a bunch of studies on this. I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about it. So does uh, Talib Naseb, something Naseb Talib, something like that. He wrote The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile. Yeah, they were talking about, the studies show that during a war, all of a sudden, the mental institutions, they go down. People stop going to the hospital because they're out driving cabs, helping the wounded, delivering things. All of a sudden, people who are normally crazy and not don't fit in are actually out helping others, and the mental institutions start to decline in population. And
Interesting.
it goes along with what you're saying. And really, if
Yeah.
you think about it, that's the bottom line: is what can you focus on that is valuable to you, but bigger than you? It doesn't depend on you, but it means a lot to you to see it get done. I recovered from my, 40 years. I think I talked about, I was an addict coming out of college, and, football and so on. I recovered because I had a baby boy, and now he's 42, and it's been 41 years since I've been clean. But tending to him and then realizing how much I'd neglected my wife and what I was missing, all of that was discovered when I decided I was going to serve him. Then I discovered my wife, and we were able to reconcile. We've been married 45 years, together 50. And, you know, I remember I don't remember it being a real difficult thing. There was some challenge to it, but I just thought about my son and my wife, and I was off. I'm okay. I'm going to go get this done. I'm going to go home tonight and not to the bar or to the drug dealers or whatever I was up to then. And my
Yeah.
life transformed. So I think just to your point, really.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because as you mentioned, the con and you had another term you used,
Racket.
racket. And the racket is amplified nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Well,
all about you and you
yeah.
need this, or you're not good enough, you need this. You're not good enough, you need to buy this.
Yeah. Well, it's a
Um,
great marketing strategy, isn't it? You're
oh
not good
yeah,
enough. Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
If you buy this elixir, and you take it once a month, you're gonna feel better about yourself and
Oh yeah,
all that. And some
yeah,
people get so deep into exercise and so on. It's not like another addiction. And I believe in being healthy. Don't get me wrong. I
yeah,
write about 5 times a week, but yeah, I mean, why am I writing? Why do I exercise? Well, I exercise so I can be there for my grandkids, my daughter, and my son, and my wife, and my team, and I enjoy it. I enjoy being with them and accomplishing whatever we're doing in whatever domain.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that kind of investment, I can understand why people shy away from it because you know mammals, like if you do something and you get hurt, you tell yourself, I'm never going to do that again. So if you extend yourself into a relationship and somebody hurts you, the most common strategy is, well, I don't ever want to put myself in that position again. But in doing so, I've actually eliminated so much future because I can learn from what missed there. And then, in fact, the suffering is part of that, will open up that learning. I'll anchor pain into what I missed, what I can control. I can't control you, but I can notice when this thing started to go off and where I continued to go on with it as if it was something it wasn't. That's where the lie kills us. Now, if I don't want to
yeah,
look into the lie, then I'm just going to say, I'm just never going to put myself in that position again.
yeah,
Yeah. So I know for me that I've had that to think about that a lot because certainly we all have our wounds. My mother was a schizophrenic, manic depressive schizophrenic, and at 12, she'd been hospitalized when I was about 10. And then for 2 years, I became a go-between. But I remember thinking, and a lot of the issues I had to navigate early with my wife was I was never going to let any woman too close, you know, and it was a kind of a subconscious, it wasn't a thought that was right up in the forefront.
oh yeah, yeah,
But I noticed that was operating because whenever I was called to be vulnerable, I'd back off. That would just create the very problem I could use to justify my
yeah,
backing off. It's like a vicious circle. That's what
yeah,
the racket does, creates a
yeah.
vicious.
It's interesting. Don't some people call those like you're in agreement with the lie or it's a
Yeah,
stronghold and you got to break the
stronghold.
stronghold?
And it
And
protected you at one point, and
yeah,
now it's eating your lunch. It's destroying your
that's right.
life. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. One of the things I had to learn was that I had to make difficult decisions based on facts, not an outcome I was hoping for.
Oh yeah.
So I was staying in a business too long because I kept
Oh
hoped for if I just stay a little bit long, just work harder,
yeah.
harder, harder, harder,
Or if
not
I wait
smarter.
longer, maybe it'll go away. Maybe they won't do this anymore.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh gosh, pain,
Yeah.
pain, a lot of pain
Unnecessary.
there.
Yeah.
So Dan, as you're working with clients, it sounds like you're not afraid to politely, empathetically, but in a good cop fashion, kind of get in their face and say, "Hey, this is your lane. You need to stay in this lane to get
More
where
like
you want to go."
I usually ask them, is you sure you want to do what you're going to do? Or if they say things are a certain way, are you sure that way? How do you know? Can you prove they're that way? If you
Yeah,
can't, what if they weren't that way, would you want to know?
Yeah.
What I work on is getting people curious. And I will, yes, of course, say, wait a minute, before you do this, let's look at what's coming down the road if you continue this. Like we have those kinds of conversations because I'm committed to their commitment. Inviting them into considering the impact of their choice in the future that's coming is a privilege and an honor. And that's what wakes people up is when they see that, they go, all of a sudden, the decision isn't as hard as it was before they saw what was coming. I
Does
call
that
it the,
reconnect them to
oh
what
man.
was fascinating?
Yeah. And
I want to
sometimes
go back to your word, fascinating. Okay.
yeah, oh
Because
yeah. Yeah, because I'm fascinated with that. The things we're talking about. Like I used to work with my mother. She was very bright and she could obfuscate anything. And I got really good at really staying on purpose with her and then asking her, is this what you mean? Because that's what you said. Is this what you want? Because this is what's coming, you know. Doing that with her over and over and over again was
yeah,
profound. And I found that the very same thing's true with any human being. What we tend to do, though, if you think about, I call it the Michael Jackson or the star syndrome, we eliminate those voices from our lives and we find people who agree with everything we do. And then it's just like putting your foot on the accelerator going right over the cliff. You
yeah,
know, you actually need people who are willing to challenge your great ideas because you're not seeing, nobody's seeing everything. Nobody's a self-made person.
yeah.
You know, we choose how we relate to the world, but when we accomplish, we're standing on the shoulders of so many generations of people who have given their lives to be able to give us this kind of life that we have now. And if we can accept that, we can join in with them for the next generation. And that's really what I'm looking to do in everything I'm doing, you know, is I want to generate that sense of responsibility.
It's interesting. It reminds me of those that series of three movies where Olympus has fallen, London has fallen, Angel has fallen, and I don't know whether you caught those, but they're about a Secret Service agent. I can't remember the actors' names, but the guy who played the president, who's a brilliant actor, in the final one, his top protector on the CIA team, Secret Service team, whatever, Secret Service, they had been framed
Ah,
that he had tried to kill the president. And as he comes out of the coma, I don't want to give away the whole movie, but they're telling him that this guy went against him and different things are happening. And he makes a profound statement where he says, you know, in this position, one of the hardest things to find is somebody you can trust because everybody's got an angle.
yeah, man.
And to find those people, you know, it's like I've said for years, is you find out who your true friends are is when you're out and you get some food stuck in your teeth, they tell you.
And they tell you,
Yeah. They don't wait an hour or say
you
nothing.
know,
You know, they tell you right away, oh, excuse me, I know this is uncomfortable, blah, blah, blah. So, same thing, you need to surround yourself with not only wise counselors, but people who have the courage
courageous.
to respectfully, empathetically, but firmly say, hey, you know, it's really not say you're wrong, but like you're doing,
Yeah.
ask those questions.
Is
Hey,
this
have
what
you
you
thought of
really
this?
want?
What
Have you
happens
thought
if
of,
this happens?
yeah. I mean, personally, that's been what's been valuable for my wife and I as well. I mean, it's like a marriage. The marriage won't live, you won't renew romance if you're not willing to take those risks. It's when you take those risks and you find the other person there that it deepens the intimacy. Well, the same thing happens on the team. If I take a risk with you and you're a teammate and I risk what you think of me for the purpose of what we're doing, and I'm saying what I think, knowing full well it may not be right, but offering you the benefit of that, and it makes a difference, or you push back and I see it's not true. Either way, we're closer the next moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dan, this has been fantastic. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, I wish we had more time. I hope our paths cross again soon.
Oh, I love it.
People getting in touch with you, how would they learn more about what you're doing, your team's doing? Because it sounds like you're doing some great stuff.
I'm on LinkedIn and you can look at my website. Our website is takenewground.com. And we have a couple of public offerings where our executives, our clients send their executives, we have some public people involved. It's a 4-day leadership intensive called the Revenant Process. We do that, very intense, practicing a lot of what we talked about. And we have a leadership academy where we give a coaching certificate out of it. We train people in just the frameworks that we're using, and we really work with people presencing themselves. And that's called the Intrepid Academy for Effective Leadership. All of that is on our website at takenewground.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been a blessing to talk with you and, catch up a bit. But I just wish you tremendous success. I'm sure you're doing awesome things with your clients.
We're loving it. And thanks, David, for the invitation. This has been great. Thank you.